Can we please have that be the beginning of the show? Just me burping and you say, cut it out, assholes. There's no context needed at all.
Cut it out, assholes.
So what have you watched? Anything good lately?
I watched this cool AI movie thing about drones and the self-driving tanks.
For sale in Russia?
For sale in Russia. It actually starts with, like any good spy movie, this expo starts somewhere in the country just north of Moscow.
Yeah. That was
it was like a job fair for AI technology.
It's just the arms shopping.
Yeah. It was it self-driving tanks? What's the word? Autonomous drones.
Yeah.
Which basically it's like kill every male 18 to 35 wearing a yarmulke.
Kill drones. They're programmable.
Yeah.
So you can.
Don't kill anyone under like 4 feet tall because it probably is a child.
Yeah.
But kill all the men.
Yeah. That was a great report. I watched the same thing, and I thought it was fascinating when they tried to explain like an example of machine logic.
Yeah.
The super logic, and when they chose as an example, what is it like to cure a certain disease?
Yeah.
Was it cancer? What was it?
I think it was cancer.
And so the way to cure it through machine logic, like the fastest way to cure it was to give everybody cancer, so that you would be forced to try every possible way to cure this thing and eventually come up with a cure. And
right,
and so the amount of people you would lose in the process would be just astonishing.
Right.
But that would be the fastest way to come up with
but eventually you would end up curing it.
Yeah.
Just you would have half the population left.
Maybe more you'd lose. Yeah. It's you think about the times of the plague.
Right.
For example, plague, they lost 3/4 of the population, and sometimes 2/3. That this is an enormous amount of people when you're talking overall population.
Gotta keep the
so
label
much
off camera. We're not getting sponsored.
Right. So much so that call us Coke if you do want to sponsor us.
Cola.
Right. But the plague affected the world so much that it essentially created a middle class almost for the first time in medieval times.
Well, it was also too the plagues have over the years I think we may have talked about this.
The survivor percentage.
Yeah. That they can't get a disease no matter what it is.
Yeah. There's a 10 to 15% of the European population right now is immune to HIV.
Yeah. Because they're just through genealogy they've survived everything.
There's going to be, a certain part of the population that's always going to eke it out.
Did you ever watch that show, The Last Ship?
Sounds familiar.
It was a TNT show. It was on for, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 seasons. And it was basically about like a new plague. Mm-hmm. And it was smallpox-esque, but it was sort of rapidly killing people.
Yeah.
But there was people there. There was people who couldn't get it. Remember, like they could walk up and kiss the person who had it was dying, and it was sort of that same theory. And I think a little bit was what they would say was, well, 15 to 20% of us can't get it, and there's 15 or 20% of us who can get it but will be cured. Yeah. So you're talking about somewhere between 85 and 40 to 85% of the population will just die.
Yeah. Well. 40 to 85% was the mortality rate of people having children 100 years ago in this country. I mean, it's really scary, but that's literally what it was. And the fact that I think we spoke about this too. We've lived in such close proximity to animals for tens of thousands of years, maybe hundreds of thousands of years.
Yeah, I mean
that
since we have been a race that we've lived next to animals.
Yeah, that we've built up immunities. And I mean, smallpox is a great example of that because they used cowpox in order to create the immunity for smallpox, the vaccine.
Yeah.
So it's, they're related, etc. But I think, anyways, that's a fascinating topic.
Mm-hmm.
We could probably go on and on.
That's a whole nother episode.
Yeah. I was telling you something a little bit off camera about, which I found creepy, was every really good horror flick, is this still running?
Yeah.
Every good horror movie that you ever saw, especially in the 80s, but probably even now, every really good horror flick you've ever seen where you see a skeleton or, a half skeleton or, any type of creep show shit, Night of the Living Dead, Return of the Living Dead, anything.
Dusk Till Dawn.
Yeah. Those are not fake, and they're not plastic. Those are real human skeletons they use in the movies.
Some trippy ass shit, right?
Poltergeist, skeletons come out of the pool and shit. Those are real.
Yeah.
Apparently, they, just like doctors and medical students, they like to use real skeletons because they vary. There's variances, between them. Whereas a copy of a skeleton would just be the same skeleton over and over and over again. And two, for the movies, at least, when they want to make it look like there's still skin on it,
mm-hmm.
they use latex, and latex it has to be baked on,
mm-hmm.
apparently, and so you can't bake these plastic skeletons or skulls. You need a real human skull in order to do that. So they're cooking human skulls with latex on them in order to make these horrific creations in horror flicks that we watch.
I wonder how many, with the way how. What's the right word? PC Hollywood is now.
Yeah.
How many of them are actually still real skeletons that they use?
I believe they probably most of them, to be honest with you. Here's one thing I have kind of picked up is that if you don't have to fake it, don't fake it.
Yeah.
Like, do the real thing, as you watch, we hear about movies where, Brad Pitt got his nose broken or somebody else. It's like, yeah, because they're trying to make it as so real as possible that it is real at a certain point. They're not faking it. When you look at some of these elaborate sets, the stuff that's not CGI'd in, there's a master set builder making something look that good and look that way. It's not just, we used it in After Effects and shit like that. Right. I mean, sometimes that now is the case, but for the most part,
sometimes just doing it on CGI is cheaper than building a set.
Right. I mean, in certain cases you have to, right? Yeah. Titanic, I'm sure a good part of that had to be, CGI'd and everything else.
Yeah.
But,
By the way, I still haven't seen it.
Really? Good for you.
I know the ending.
Yeah, there you go. What do you need to see it for? You know how it ends.
Right? They die.
Yeah.
Most of them.
Except
for the unsinkable Molly Brown.
Right. It's God. I like every other guy in the 90s got dragged to that movie on a date and had to sit through it.
I did not.
And then I remember having an argument with somebody who I really respected. I just thought it was hilarious, but they were trying to tell me that Celine Dion was the greatest singer in the world.
Okay, that person should run off a cliff.
This was a great person, and it's really, and I think
damn it, Elsa.
I have a feeling they were defending their.
Was it Elsa?
No, they were. I think they were defending their wife or something. But they were, it's just like, she's got a great voice. She's a great singer, and had the nerve to tell me that she had a better voice than Stevie Wonder, and I just my head just about split. Sorry for all you Celine Dion fans out there. I prefer Stevie Wonder. But these things, I've got a little bit of a clip. I can throw these in here of a guy named Tom Savini, who's a legendary makeup effects artist, explaining to David Letterman.
Oh yeah, you were saying
yeah. How they're real skeletons.
Now, what is this made of?
Well, it's a real skeleton. We buy these, and they send them to us, and the boxes are labeled India. They all come from India.
This is an actual human skeleton?
Right. It's a real human skeleton. It's very expensive, and we made casts of the face to sculpt the makeup. And,
but isn't that must be they've got laws against that? I mean,
maybe that's why they're from India.
They actually come from India. Those are actual human bones.
Mm-hmm.
Now, could you buy a skeleton in the United States legally?
Well, I did buy it here from a company called Carolina Biological in North Carolina. But when they send it...
Wait a minute, Carolina Biological?
In North Carolina, you can buy...
Better than Bones R Us, I guess.
They have this huge catalog, and you can
They
buy...
have a big catalog.
You can buy tarantulas and snakes, rat lungs.
Rat lungs.
Rat lungs.
Now, why is it better to have the actual thing than just say like something out of plastic or?
Well, they do make plastic ones, and they're more expensive than the real bone ones. I guess they must cast individual bones to reproduce it in plastic. But the idea of getting a real one is, see, if we have to bake this in an oven.
God.
No,
God.
Well, we have to do that to cure the latex. The plastic one would melt.
Yeah.
But the real bone one...
Well, keep an eye on the loved ones, folks, when, you know...
So Tom Savini tells Letterman that they're real skeletons and that they're all from India. Now, this is 1984. If anybody's ever seen Return of the Living Dead, that's from 1985. The very beginning scenes where the old man is taking the new kid around the warehouse. He tells him that all these skeletons that they've gotten there are from India.
Yeah.
And then he goes on to say, the bigger question is, the kid asks him why from India. He says, I don't know. He says, but the bigger question is, how do they all have perfect teeth? And suggests that there might be a skeleton farm over there in India.
Yeah.
Where do you get all these skeletons from?
Oh, they come from India.
India?
International treaty. All skeletons come from India.
No kidding, how come?
How the hell do I know how come? The important question is, where do they get all the skeletons with perfect teeth? I'm going to ask you a serious question. How many people you know die with a beautiful, perfect set of choppers in their puss, huh?
Well, nobody I can think of.
Yeah, no, I think that there's a skeleton farm over in India.
Now, in the movie, he's joking, but in 1985, they actually banned the export of skeletons from India because they had found they had caught somebody with hundreds of children's skeletons that they were about to export, and they're very rare anyway.
Mm.
And they thought that perhaps people were killing children. The rumor got out that people were killing children in order to take their skeletons and sell them. They're getting really thousands of dollars for these specimens. And the rumors went around, and a few people, including I think an Australian tourist and some other tourists, were actually killed by like mobs who thought these rumors got around that they're here to steal our children, kind of thing. Yeah, so you got to be careful in the streets of
India.
India, absolutely. Most of those countries around there. I remember when like a PSA thing they tried to film about children being kidnapped by people on motorcycles came out. Like 3 people got killed in who were on motorcycles because suddenly they're looking at everybody like they're stealing their children. You have to be really careful in those countries about what you broadcast.
Right.
But back to the Indian bone trade, which is had actually existed for well over 100 years. They banned the export in 1985 because of rumors that children were being killed. And ever since, the medical community has had to change its practices back up until the 1980s. From like the 1800s all the way up until the 1980s, medical students would get what they called a bone box, which was like a skeleton in a box. And it was like $300. And they would, that's what they used for, throughout their entire time at medical school. Now every 2 student gets a half a skeleton, and the university keeps these specimens so that they never really ever need new ones.
They're reused.
Yeah, unless they get damaged. So I mean, as a result, there isn't a ready supply of them anymore that's legal. However, they still have been getting out, even though the ban was, since 1985. They have.
There's always going to be a way to get something illegal out.
Well, they found a way to sell them in India, and then somebody just smuggles them out.
Right.
So they can, and
they can't export them, but they can sell them legally, and someone else can export them.
But the numbers start to get staggering around the height of it, which was the 1980s. And somewhere around those time, they were exporting in the range of 60,000 skeletons a year. At this rate, and they had done it well over 100 years at that point, they believe that many of the graveyards in these parts of India are completely empty.
It's 165 people a day.
That's amazing.
Or 165 skeletons a day.
Yeah, and they these are anybody who ever went to school or went to a chiropractor's office or a doctor's office, and you see that skeleton hanging.
Yeah, I would say if you're
they're
30 or older,
yeah,
they're all real.
they're yeah. You've seen them most likely, and chances are they've all come from India. In fact, Indian skeletons are considered superior because of the method that the people use. Apparently, they can get skeletons from Asia, from China, and some other areas, and they're considered inferior, not because of anything anatomically, but because of the way they're prepared and presented. In India, they have been doing this well over 100 years, so they really know how to do it.
And somewhere around 150-ish.
Yeah, maybe longer, and
that we know of.
Yeah, and their bleached white skeletons are highly prized, and the ones that are like actually put together with the
wire,
the steel and the wire and all that, those they fetch thousands of dollars.
I was never in a frat, but I had some buddies that were, and they used to have, I don't remember what they called them, but it was a full skeleton that wore the scarf and the sweater.
Yeah.
And you had to shake his hand every time you came in the frat.
Oh, yeah. So he was the mascot.
He was the mascot of that frat house.
Yeah. It's something even creepier for another episode. My grandfather, who's in his 80s now, went down to Georgia in the 1950s and attended school there with a member of this very prominent family who owned a very large funeral parlor. I'm not going to mention the name of it. And he went in there with his friend after school to this mansion / funeral parlor, and the kid said to my grandfather, he goes, "Do you want to see? Do you want to see a dead N-word?" Mm-hmm. And he took him over to the front parlor of the funeral parlor, and there was an African American man who had been embalmed, and had been embalmed for well over 100 years, had been inside that funeral parlor as the greeter for people to come in, and also as an example of the family's handiwork of how well they could preserve somebody. This skeleton was kept from the mid-1800s all the way until about the 1970s. Late 60s, it supposedly disappeared. I heard it was put into storage. He was put into storage. And, but I believe by the 70s or 80s, he was actually buried.
That's crazy.
I actually contacted a reporter from that area, and he gave me quite a few details, including the name of a doctor who had written a few articles about this particular person.
Really?
There were a lot of rumors, a lot of sick rumors, because some racist shit had happened. The rumor
Savannah in the 1950s,
right? So and went back to the 1880s, at least with this family.
Yeah.
And then the cadaver, or it turns out, was even older than that.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So the rumor that the story that this kid told my grandfather was that says that was the first black governor of Georgia. Obviously, that's a racist joke, right?
Yeah.
Then the other story was that this man had been an employee of the family of this funeral parlor, and he had actually driven the carriages, and so that's why he still had his 1880s top hat and tails, kind of like he was like a carriage driver. Mm-hmm. Back before they had hearses, they had the
right.
Yeah. So that was the other story.
And then they just decided to keep him.
Yeah. Well, no, the story was that he worked for them, and that he liked the family so much, and that they took such good care of him that they said, when he was dying, where do you want us to bury? He said, "I'd like you to just keep me here with you," kind of thing. And so they did. That's the story.
I feel like that's the 1970s PC version of the real truth.
Well, the story, like I said, it gets crazy because from the from the early 1900s through the 20s, 30s, and even into the 50s, it would become a tradition in this certain town. I'm not even going to mention the town.
Somewhere in
Georgia.
rural Georgia.
Yeah, well, isn't all of Georgia rural except Atlanta? It wasn't Atlanta. Anyways, and so in this town it had become a tradition to kidnap this corpse and take him on a joyride and then leave him somewhere in the town. And so one time in particular around World War II, some boys had kidnapped him, taken him around town in a convertible, and then left him leaning against a lamppost with a sign around him that said "unfit for duty." This type of shit, right? So this is the type of crazy shit that went on in this town, and I'm sure it wasn't the only town where this type of shit happened. But
I just want to say right now, this whole thing, sounds like the great way to start a fucking horror movie.
This is a real life horror movie. That old parlor too used to just drain the old blood when they were draining them out of the corpses, let it go right into the river, the creek in the back.
Oh,
so talk about horror flicks.
Because I actually read, to add to that, I had read a story that I thought was fake and figured out it was real. It was also in the South, but it wasn't Georgia. I want to say it was the Carolinas, that the post-Civil War, some family kept their property.
Yeah.
Became morticians, and they drained the blood into the fields.
Okay.
So the crops were basically fed through blood.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I believe it. I've heard a lot of... They used to just dump everything into the river back in the day. Are you hearing a buzz?
No. I don't think
I
so.
think it's because I'm so close to this. The
It just stopped.
Yeah, that's what it was. The so this back to this one that I was telling you about. He turns out the real story, and this is I got through this reporter, was that the old man who opened this funeral parlor had attended Georgia Medical College, and when they were moving the old Georgia Medical College, they came across. They went down to the basement of the old medical college, and there was a huge wooden vat, kind of like almost like one of those cedar hot tubs.
Okay.
But massive, a lot bigger, a lot deeper, and like a pool. Imagine a big wooden pool.
Mm-hmm.
And this was the tank for bodies. And back in the 1800s, early 1800s especially, they would put bodies in there and fill it with whiskey. They were still making up their minds in those days what to preserve bodies in, and so they would hundreds, thousands of gallons of whiskey were used by the medical college every year in order to preserve these bodies, and so they weren't so much as embalming them as like pickling them, literally.
More like pickling.
Yeah, and so this body in particular had sunk to the bottom without like I don't know whether the tag or the rope slipped off of them or whatever, but had sunk to the bottom. It had been down there for a long time. So much so that when the tank was emptied and everything else, they discovered, oh, wow, there's one in the bottom. They didn't know what to do with it, so they called the first person they thought of, which was the closest mortuary type thing.
Right.
And he went over there and he picked up this body and brought it back. And started to display it as, an example of his handiwork, or just a curiosity, but how long you can actually preserve a human body.
Right.
Through doing that research, I found out that this was not the only state or town where this has happened. In fact, up until recent years, it's still happening in different places. One, like in Jamaica, a woman went to Jamaica. She died there. Unfortunately, a funeral parlor took her in, prepared her, embalmed her, the whole bit. And the family never showed up to claim the body. type thing, or pay the bill or anything else like that. So they've kept her, and they keep her on display, and school children come in and tour this place and come and see this person who's been dead since like the 90s, and she's out on display still. So there's, that's just one example of more recent times it's happening. Apparently, if you go up to, there's a place in, I want to say, there's one of these, Portland. Mm-hmm. It might be Portland, might be outside of Portland. There's some
Stumptown.
There's some curiosity like museum, a privately owned museum.
Okay.
That from Wild West times, literally that you can go into this day, and there is the supposed gunfighter who's there in glass and preserved. And he was embalmed back in the 1800s and is still there. Now,
isn't there one like that in Virginia City?
I don't know. I haven't seen them. The one up here in, I think it's Portland, or it might be, it's one of those cities up there.
I watched that.
The one up there, his eyeballs, dude, his eyeballs are still there, intact, visible. It's crazy.
Now I'm going to have to go, because I watched that show with Zach Bagans.
You never see them with their eyes open. This one's chilling because, like, the eyes are open. He's looking at you.
I think I actually saw that in one of his shows. What the hell's that show called? It's the ghost hunting show. But I'm pretty sure I saw that in one of his shows.
Yeah, maybe they went through it. It's pretty neat, but macabre shit. But so the skeleton trade in India, that went on for like 100 years, and it's still kind of going on. They're still doing it, but the process that makes the coveted, the sought after, white bleached skulls and bones that they do. Apparently, they have this process is down pat.
Anyways, back to death and gore.
Death and gore stuff. Anybody wants to know the gory process of preparing a skeleton, the way that they do in India is they wrap the body in a fishing net, and it's got to be a small one so that the little finger bones and stuff don't slip through.
Right.
So it's a mesh kind of thing.
Right.
They wrap it up in that real tight, and they anchor it to the bottom of a river, and leave it there for about a week, maybe two. And all the little fish over there and the bacteria and everything else reduce it to basically mush and bones.
Right.
Then they take that out and they clean the bones, which has got to be probably the worst part of this whole thing. Then they boil them in caustic soda, and this leaves the bones yellow. So what they have to do after that is they leave the bones out in the sun for about a week, and that bleaches them white again. And then they take the bones and they boil them in hydrochloric acid, and that's the final step. And that's clean, white, bleached bones.
Ric Flair hair.
Right. And according to somebody, I read an article, apparently they smell like fried chicken.
That's the grossest thing
That's
ever.
nasty, right?
I don't even want to eat fried chicken now.
After that. Yeah.
Well, speaking of that, we're going to talk about this in another episode. But
speaking of fried chicken,
dude, it's still weird to me though that there's like bone farms.
Yeah, the one that they had rated in this article that I'd read, which was more than 10 years old, apparently had been in operation for 100 years or more, and it was only discovered because a couple guys that had relatively new hires there had been drinking at a local little pub or whatever. And were bragging or, spilled the beans that they had been hired to steal bodies. And the local villagers, dragged them to the local police station and forced them to confess. And in India, shit like that happens. A mob can drag, people to the police constable and make them talk. And so he did, and they showed him where they were at. And the police apparently still refused to raid the place because the person who ran it had connections.
Pretty powerful.
And some vigilantes ended up going in there and raiding the place. They found an entire room full of bones. They found the roof was filled with bones being bleached out. And You know, it was a real factory. They had different rooms, different places outside for different parts of the process.
It's crazy, man. Just to even think about 100, about we're guessing 150 years probably means it's 100 years past that the country of India has been basically grave robbing.
Yeah.
Or people in the country of India. I don't want to put it on everybody in India. Grave robbing, doing this process, shipping them all over the world.
All over the world. Prize specimens.
Right? And they're known for being the
place to go to.
The place to go to for a body or bones of a body. Yeah. Just crazy.
It is, and not only in the medical field, but in the entertainment field.
Right.
You know, the movies. I grew up watching, you know.
It goes back to what we always say. Every episode has to have a TV mention.
A what?
A TV mention. Always mention TV.
Yeah.
You know? So, it's just weird. Really weird.
It's creepy shit is what it is. And growing up with watching Poltergeist and all these movies where they show these things, Evil Dead and whatnot, they were using real things.
Was it the...
Seems somehow sacrilegious, you know.
Was it the Crypt Keeper that came up and was like the skeleton had the skin was like melting off of it? Was that the Crypt Keeper? I
think that's Return of the Living Dead when Silence.
No, and it talked.
Chiller.
I can't remember. I just had that image in my head of it would like pop up like Oscar the Grouch. And it would talk. And
I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
burnt off.
Yeah, no, that's oh my god, it's a Stephen King movie, or is it?
No. It was like a TV show.
It was a movie. The TV show had Tales from the Crypt on HBO, and the Crypt Keeper was down underneath like some dungeon kind of thing, and he had that weird voice. There was a earlier
like Crypt Keeper movie.
God, I thought it was a Stephen King one where it was like a comic book. Oh God, something Creep Show. Do you remember?
That's what I'm talking about.
Exactly, Creep Show.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Creep Show had that too, and that in fact the clip from the Tom Savini's on, he has that prop from Creep Show on there.
So that was
a real skeleton. So excuse my sniffle. That
it's that time of year.
Yeah, I find that creepy. You know,
I missed 2 weeks because of that damn cold.
Oh, that's right. You were sick.
Oh, dude. That was miserable.
Glad that you're feeling better.
Oh, dude, I feel 100,000 times better. It was 10 days of me just dragging myself out.
Wow.
Like, stay away from me.
That sucks. There must be that flu I had last year. That was a nightmare.
And I only missed 1 day of work.
Iron Man.
Yeah, they were.
That's pretty impressive.
They were even like, what? You're going to use a sick day?
That's pretty impressive, man. Yeah, I don't know.
I woke up at 6 a.m. and went, "Oh, I'm not going to work."
That's some scary shit. How long have we been going?
About an hour.
A
little more.
All right. Well, we don't need to go any further than this. It's
we still got more to record.
I think we've probably grossed everybody enough out with our.
But hey, if you want to get a skeleton and dig it up, we can teach you how to make it look cool.
Well, here's the other thing. If all these guys who go to like rummage sales and garage sales and all that shit, if you happen to see an anatomically displayed skeleton from a doctor's office,
it's legit,
and somebody's just selling it, cheap, it might be worth buying because
$10.
Like the reality is that these things are worth thousands. The skull itself, is like $1,200 or more.
Yeah.
Maybe more than that. So,
or if you were going to sell a skeleton, now you know it's worth.
Yeah. And not that we're encouraging anybody to do any DIY shit.
DIY.
Is it DIY?
Yeah, do it yourself.
Yeah. Now, DIY is do yourself in.
Yeah.
Don't do that. So, all right, everybody. I think we're
good.
Enough. You're good?
Yeah.
All right. I'm Phil DeSaro.
I'm Alexis Trevko.
And we'll see you on the next episode.